Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Nikki, what do you make of this today? I'm very excited about this conversation today because I don't know if you know this, but I live in a constant state of the emotional roller coaster of overwhelm and underwhelm, like constantly. It's the spiritual twin of my anxiety and OCD. So this is going to be awesome.
Yes.
And we have a great guest to talk to us about that. Very excited about that. But hold on. Before I talk to you all about her, let me tell you about us. If you want to learn a little bit more about the show, head over to takecontroladhd.com. Get to know us a little bit better. You know the drill. It's at Take Control ADHD, like everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. We all love Pinterest. Take Control ADHD. If you really want to connect with us, head over to our ADHD Discord community. It's super easy. It's free. It's open to the public. Just visit takecontroladhd.com/Discord, and you'll be whisked over to the invitation page where you can log in or create your own new account. It's really, really great. If you really want to support the show, though, which we would love it if you would consider, particularly if you're a longtime listener, head over to patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Patreon is listener-supported podcasting. It is a way for your few bucks a month to add up to supporting bucks a month for us. It supports me and Nikki. It supports the whole team that works to put these shows together on the back end. And we are real human people, and we're working really hard to keep this podcast going. And it's season 29, y'all. So help us help you. Wow. That's the deal. It's a real Jerry Maguire. Help us help you. So we love doing this show. We want to keep doing it. Patreon.com/the ADHD podcast to learn more. So are you feeling overwhelmed or, I don't know, underwhelmed? For those with ADHD, these two extremes feel like a constant companion. And today, Coach Brooke Schnittman joins us to dive into the unique challenges of navigating the emotional roller coaster of ADHD. Brooke, welcome to the podcast at long last.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you, Nikki. Wow, that's a really hard intro to follow. So I'm going to just get like the underwhelm to kick in because I'm a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That's right.
You've got such an interesting background. And let's start. For those who don't know you, don't know how that happened. But for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about how you got started as an ADHD coach, because you come from such a fantastic background in education. I want to hear about that. What happened?
Thank you. Like most people with ADHD, I kind of gravitated to people with ADHD. I dated lots of men with ADHD, and my dad used to make fun of me. It's like, why is every single man that you're dating having ADHD? But what I didn't know at the time is I had it. And ironically, I went to undergrad in education, and then I was like, this is not like exciting enough for me. Let's make it spicy. So then I immediately went into my master's in special education, and then immediately became a special education teacher, then administrator, and did that for 15 years. And once there was too much red tape in the school system and too much pushing paper as an administrator and not like getting to the core of helping kids, right? And seeing that in front of me, then I shifted and then I got coached. And in the process of getting coached, I realized I want to be an ADHD coach because there was someone in the field who recommended it to me. I was like, okay, great, let's do this. And this was in 2018. So 6 months into my coaching journey as an ADHD coach, I realized I had ADHD. And then I met my non-diagnosed husband 6 months later and his two diagnosed kids. And now we are one big ADHD family.
Oh my God, that's outstanding.
That is so interesting because that is not something...
You discovered you had ADHD by becoming an ADHD coach.
I've never heard that before. That is so interesting.
Oh
wow.
My God, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Can I we're talking about other stuff today, but what's that like? What is that aha moment like when you realize that, oh my God, the call is coming from inside the house?
It made a lot of sense. And at the same time, I was like, okay, like, well, I'm kind of already doing this. So my ADHD brain is like continuing to keep doing the thing, right? But it happened to be that like once I became a mom and once we got married, life changed and my structure changed. And then I was like, oh, this ADHD thing is like creating havoc. I need to restructure my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Which goes into what we're talking about today. So we're talking about underwhelm and overwhelm, and we're going to talk about both. But I'm really interested in starting with underwhelm because I think we talk a lot about overwhelm and people immediately know what we're talking about. But with underwhelm, it's not always as clear cut. So can you describe a little bit about what underwhelm is for someone with ADHD?
Yeah, underwhelm is boredom essentially, and it can happen when you have been overwhelmed and then you burn out and then you do nothing because you are like way too overstimulated, right? So then you get to underwhelm because of the understimulation for so long.
Mm.
Or so you could be bored, there could be like a lack of interest, due date, um connection to the thing. So we get into this hypo focus state where you don't even want to touch the thing
Mm-hmm.
because there's no like dopamine kicking in that gets you
Yeah.
interested to do the thing.
Avoidance. A lot of avoiding
Avoidance.
is going on here.
Thank you for
Yeah.
putting this in English.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time. And I'm sure listeners understand exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
and I think this is really it's triggering. It's triggering for me
I'm sorry.
and my
I didn't mean
ADHD.
to activate
No,
you
you're good.
in
You're good. That's
control podcast.
because I feel like that boredom is so often mistaken for idleness, right? Like for like, oh, he's just not motivated to get stuff done. Like he's just,
Nope.
and that's a different thing, right? Like,
It is a different
how do
thing.
I teach people about that? How do I talk about it effectively?
If the person has ADHD and they're bored, it could be for many different reasons. Like I mentioned before, it could have been because they were totally like used out all of their energy and dopamine and they are depleted now and now they're bored. Or it could be because they're not interested. They don't know how to activate to get to see the connection of why they need to do this. They might know the how and the what, but not how it's connecting to them. It might not be simple enough. So at the same time, they can be overwhelmed and underwhelmed at the same time. So they just don't understand the bigger picture. So they just push it off and then become overwhelmed in the front end and then underwhelmed like interiorly. So essentially, to help with that, is that part of the question?
Mhm.
Yes, let's just pretend
Okay.
it is.
No, we're just going to
Okay.
talk about it,
Yeah,
but no help.
we're doing
No
great.
help. Yeah, no.
I didn't want to jump the gun.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you're
No,
good.
but you know what? Before you get started, this is why the metaphor works so well for me. Spoon theory, right? Like too many spoons, too few
Yeah.
spoons for originally for chronic pain, but it works so well in describing sort of emotional resilience. And for my ADHD, it's great because it feels like what we're talking about is I know a lot about what it's like to have too few spoons, but sometimes too many spoons, I shut down too. Right? Like I could be almost
Absolutely.
too
Too many
ready for a thing and I don't know what
choices.
to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyhow,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Too much spiraling,
yeah.
too
Mhm,
many thoughts about where the decision should lie.
mhm.
But I've talked a lot about this week specifically. I'm gonna rein it into the underwhelm piece of like we can get overwhelmed because we are looking for that exciting thing that's different, that's complicated, that we haven't tackled yet. But we can be underwhelmed by the things that are quote unquote, and I'm saying this in quotes for anyone who's not watching, easy,
Mhm.
like waking up and
Mhm.
thinking about what you want to accomplish for the day, 10 seconds going and getting water for yourself, like literally scheduling in the exercise or doing that small action that you have to do to take care of your hierarchy of needs, and also small action to build momentum so then things get onto the path of motivation and momentum and persistence and confidence. So I know I'm kind of going in circles here, but I feel like we can be underwhelmed with the things that are quote unquote easy, but aren't really easy because we're not doing them.
Oh my
Right.
God. I can't were you in my house this morning? I got so like I was so bent out of shape at my son. My son's 18. Nick, if you're listening, you're awesome. Also, this morning you're kind of a jerk. So this is the thing. Like he has long days, and he gets up in the morning, and there are some basic needs like eating and showering and like taking care of yourself that need to happen.
Yes.
But instead, he gets up at 8:30, doesn't get out of bed, and just lays there, does some things on his phone, but mostly just lays there until 9:30 when now he's late. He has to rush out the door and doesn't take care of the basics. And I think there's something to this he also has ADHD. Again, we're proud ADHD family. And so I think there's something to this, that those elements are not yet stimulating enough to have him engage in them to be able to start the day. So he can't prove that he even knows how to do them. So it just creates strife, because also with my ADHD, I'm projecting the hell out of it because I know that I struggle with this too. Well, okay. Well, thanks for the therapy.
Well,
this was great. I
Thank you for
have
being-
some amends letters to write.
No, but like it's serious. Like it's so funny. So when I first started getting into personal development, let's say when I was teaching, right? So that's 20 years ago. But then when I like really got into the adult personal development 6 years ago, I read all the books, right? As a typical non-diagnosed ADHDer.
Right.
And I learned concepts, and now I'm being hit with those concepts again 6 years later, right? I'm like, oh, these are so boring. I know these things. Like, I could teach these things, but then I'm not doing them. So
Yes.
then when I'm like, oh, why am I so resistant to it? And why does it sound boring from this person? Let me try it. And I'm like, oh, they actually work.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes the trigger, I feel like, where we are, the trigger has to come from someplace that is more stimulating than the thing that you have to do that you don't want to do. Right.
Yes.
And my hypothesis is that hearing me say, again, you got to get out of bed on time, take a shower, eat some protein, isn't going to work. It's really his boss that needs to tell him, dude, you stink. Like, do you shower? That is a more stimulating signal than dad.
Oh,
And
totally.
that I think will be more triggering, right? So,
yes.
Okay. So I also need to write his boss. We're doing great. No, we're hitting it out of the park, you guys.
So you're projecting, you're telling on him. What
and
else?
I'm meddling. I'm deeply meddling. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, there's that connection piece for him, and he's younger, so he might not have that metacognitive executive function skill, or like the connection of why it's important if it's coming from dad who's just annoying him, right? Because dad annoys, mom annoys, right? That's why we pay executive function coaches and tutors, even if we are them ourselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But yes, there has to be that connection of why it's important and what does that mean to them, and like how does that simple thing that they think they can avoid to do the hard, quote unquote, productive things that they have to get off their to-do list, why is doing that simple thing going to get them to produce even better in the long term?
Yeah. Well, and that's so interesting, because I feel like coming to that understanding requires you to be able to recognize the signs of underwhelm in yourself. And I think that's because of the metacognitive challenges, the regulation challenges that we have. It's hard to recognize that.
Yes, it is very hard to recognize that. And you're right. So looking from a bird's eye view of what's happening to me, how is this happening? Why is this happening? We don't typically stop and pause. Usually we get into that doom loop of like, oh my God, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Oh my God. 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 And then you get overwhelmed, right? When you were underwhelmed to begin with. So now it's exhausting, and then you shut down and do nothing. And then you feel terrible about yourself because you did absolutely nothing and you weren't productive, and so
I should have, I could have,
spiral. I could have,
right?
They're doing it. Then you go on social media and everyone else is doing the thing that you thought you should be doing. And it looks like they're doing it the way that you should have been doing. So now everything is wrong, and then you burn out again. And the spiral just goes on and on and on until you can take care of those basic hierarchy of needs with that accountability, with that connection, with making it so small, and at the same time tying it to an actual other task that you need to do. So taking care of
S-
yourself at the same time as doing a task that you've been wanting to do for a long time.
So, can you give us a specific example, like maybe something that you worked with a client, just so that people can really wrap their heads around what you're talking about?
Totally. So if someone is in chaos, which we could be in chaos multiple times a day, multiple times a week, month, year, um, understanding your why and making these big goals aren't going to help you. So you need to just take action to build momentum. But at the same time as taking action, you also have to ask yourself, what am I not attending to in myself? And your body always knows what you're not attending to. Like, what's the first thing that you need? Is it water? Is it time to yourself? Is it
Sleep.
is it sleep?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
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 Right. Is it eating? Is it reading? Is it listening to music? Is it a podcast? Is it getting away from stimulus? What is it that you need? So at the same time of taking care of, let's say, taking that nap and not feeling guilty about it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for 20 minutes.
Hmm.
And then when you wake up from the nap, you're going to send one email because your email list is now, a mile long,
Mhm.
and you're avoiding it like the Black Plague. But the more you avoid it, the worse it gets.
Hmm.
So chopping off, or cutting part of that rock down so you clear some of that chaos and that space so you can create forward action. And once you start doing something, even it's 1%, then you continue to take more and more action and feel less guilty over time.
Can you talk for a second about the specific executive function deficit that prevents us from seeing Maslow correctly, right? Or Maslow thoroughly? Does that make sense? Like, what is the executive function deficit that prevents us from being able to understand our need for the basics?
So I love Dr. Thomas Brown's model, the
Hmm.
6 executive function clusters. So I would say it's all of them. The ability to get started and activate, the ability to sustain attention on something that isn't interesting, the ability to sustain effort, your working memory. So like, oh my God, I really need to get that water because I'm like I'm dry, I'm thirsty, but I forget about it because all of a sudden I'm thinking about 5 other things that I have to be doing. So
Hmm.
trying to keep that thought in your head because of your poor working memory is going to get in the way of taking care of your hierarchy of needs unless you put it in front of you and you actively even put a post-it on your mirror with like the 3 things or one thing you should attend to for yourself that day when you wake up or
Hmm.
even during the day. Another thing is completion, right? So like executing it all the way till the end, right? There's lots of reasons why we can't finish things. So I would say that to answer your question, it's all of the executive dysfunctions that get in the way.
Hmm.
Well, and I think to me, it's important to be aware of that I'm not just hunting for a single silver bullet, right? I have
No,
to be holistically aware of my experience, which is hard to do. And it's okay because we can do hard things.
Hmm.
Like, it just
absolutely.
takes practice and, intent.
Oh, and one last thank you, executive function that I forgot to mention, emotion, right? So
Right.
Yeah.
emotion is one of Dr. Thomas Brown's clusters. So if you aren't doing all of those other 5 executive functions, right, or you have a deficit in those, then you're going to get emotional, right? Like, why can't I remember those multi steps? Why am I processing this so slow? Why can't I finish it? Why can't I start, right? And then you get emotional, you get angry, you get upset, you feel that rejection, and then all the shame starts kicking
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oof. So thanks. Ugh. I'm really tired all of a
So
sudden.
this is what you do about it.
Yeah.
Nothing,
Yeah.
right?
No, so we're done. Yeah. So but before we get into like specifically tackling some things, let's swing the other way, right? Let's talk about overwhelm. Even though we know overwhelm can be kind of a table stakes emotional position for people with ADHD, how do we get there? Like, why is it that overwhelm is the thing that we need to be aware of?
Yeah. Everything is usually of equal importance to us. So if everything is of equal importance, what do we start first and how do we finish it? So we can get overwhelmed by deciding and choosing. That's one thing. We can get
Hmm.
overwhelmed by too much stimulus. We can be overwhelmed by not finishing things and having too much on our plates. We can be overwhelmed by our own negative thoughts and our shame spirals. We can be overwhelmed by our executive functions not working properly and, feeling bad about it. We could be overwhelmed by anxiety, the anxiety that kicks in because we don't have our ADHD managed the way that we want to. Or we can be overwhelmed because a new thing popped up that we didn't expect and it took us off of our route that we had created the structure for. And now we're floundering because we don't know when we're going to finish the things that we promised we were going to finish today.
Well, and
So,
it's that all or nothing thinking that
Yeah.
that I hear you talking a little bit about too is, something happened you weren't expecting and it completely threw everything off. And so a lot of times people will feel like, okay, well then the day's ruined or
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then why even start?
right.
Like,
Mhm.
exactly. Right. And then a big thing that is, like that on a bigger level, going on vacation, getting
Mhm.
sick, getting hurt. So it takes you off of your routine.
Yeah.
And then you have no idea how to get back onto that routine because you forget about like the smallest thing to get back on there, right? The thing that you can
Yeah.
attach to, like, ooh, if I do this one small action that I know I can do, then
Mhm.
I'm okay performing at 20% if I'm giving 20%. You know what I mean? It's like, it's
Hmm.
So that's the
okay to be.
talking to yourself about it. Like you're coaching yourself because what you just said is okay, I can do this, right? So it's also this mindset of recognizing the overwhelm and then what is that first step or what questions do you have to ask yourself to
Yes.
activate? Yeah,
Yes.
interesting.
And if you know that there are things coming up that are going to throw you for a loop, trying to activate the metacognitive
Right.
executive function that is so hard in us, and prepare for when things
Mhm.
are pretty stable and there's momentum.
Mhm.
Prepare for the worst case scenario. If this happens, then I'm just going to do that one thing that I know I can attach myself to start giving me momentum.
And do you find that to be a way to kind of avoid that overwhelm early is to
It's a
know that it
way
might be
that
coming?
yes and no and both. So
Mhm.
if you feel overwhelmed when things happen like that, it will catch you in your overwhelm cycle and it will be like a stop sign, almost like a visual, like, oh, I know if I just do this one thing and I finish it, I'm going to be okay for today.
Yeah.
Um, or yes, it could stop you from feeling overwhelmed, both.
Yeah.
What's so interesting about this is like hearing you talk about the circumstances that drive toward overwhelm is the way the Venn diagram of constituent sort of experiences for underwhelm and overwhelm overlap, right? The whole idea
Yes.
that it's some of the same triggers and the lack of preparedness, the lack of awareness, the lack of self-awareness in the things that are required of us that drive us to both states. And
Yes.
I'm that I is a new awareness for me.
Yes, it's
Good.
interesting because when I was writing my book, I was thinking, okay, these are two separate things. But then every time I tried to come up with an example, I was like, wait, I'm
Yeah,
feeling these two things kind of at the same time, or like one is driving me to the next one.
right,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And so the the act of sort of moving us as we move toward like how do you take the boulder and start pushing it out of the way for either one of them seems like those should be connected too, right? Those strategies to
Yes.
combat both of those.
Yes.
Talk us through that. What do you how do you what's your mental model?
Okay. So my thought, again, is going back to that small little thing, that 1% action that makes you feel good about yourself and also takes care of the basics. And then you build on that, like staircase, like this is not a new concept, right? And you get to the momentum, the motivation, and the confidence eventually. Removing yourself from feeling like it has to be an A plus 100% every day. If you feel the triggers of overwhelm or even underwhelm, right?
Mhm.
Whatever your body is feeling, I'm underwhelmed because I am watching TV all day and I cannot get myself to do my work that my boss needs me to do because it's not exciting enough.
Mhm.
That might be underwhelm. But I'm watching TV all day and I'm not doing the work because I don't know where to start and it's too overwhelming is overwhelm. So, how can you get clarity on what that first step is?
Right, because either way, the shift in context is horrifying.
Horrifying.
Either
Right.
way, it's horrifying.
Right. So, what is that first thing that you need to do? If you legitimately don't know for work what that thing is, do something for yourself first, right? Turn off the TV and do the one thing that you know you can always come back to. If it's going outside, looking at the sun, taking a walk, doing deep breathing, if it's exercising, maybe you're a hard charger to try to get into the flow state, do something to get yourself back into flow. And there's lots of flow tests online from
Mhm.
Stephen Kotler and other people. But what is a thing that you can do for yourself to get your brain activated and to start thinking differently? So now you're not as emotionally connected to the task at hand that you need to do. And you could start thinking creatively on how to solve that one little first step. Maybe it's talking to someone in your company that can help you problem solve out loud and verbally process. Maybe it's just opening up the email again from a different place where your emotions and your amygdala isn't firing like crazy and you're looking at that same email very differently. Maybe it's just brainstorming everything that comes to your mind and then mind mapping it to get unstuck and you see it visually so you can understand the first step. Maybe it's actually having a conversation with your boss too. Whatever it is, you'll have more clarity once you take care of whatever your need is and you're not coming from an emotional state.
Yeah. The only thing I want to add too is that I think if you're focusing on just that first step and ignoring everything else, right? Because I think it's so easy. I always talk about the forest and the trees. You know, it's so
Mhm.
easy for an ADHDer to look at the whole forest and get completely
Mhm.
overwhelmed and
Mhm.
not know how to get through it. But if you're just looking at that one tree and figuring out what you need to do with this one tree and having the rest of the forest be blurred right now, it takes the pressure off too of figuring, like having to figure it all out right now. We're just looking at that first step.
100%. And I think sometimes we think of having to have a vision of the end goal as like the North Star. We have to have that. No, you don't always have to have that. Like you said, blurring the forest, looking at that one tree. And then, well, you know what happens once you start, you're like, oh, I'm getting more clarity and my direction is going nonlinear anyway. It's totally
Right.
zigzag. We're all taking different directions to get to whatever it is. And that thing might change
Yeah.
that North Star.
Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely. That's a very good
I mean,
point.
if you think about like problems in your life, like if you're married or if you have friendships,
When you think
right?
about problems in your
Right.
life, like if you're married.
I'm sorry.
Excellent.
It's just
No, we
to keep
get it. We
the
get
We
thing
it.
get
that comes to my
We just
mind,
learned a
right?
lot about you, Brooke, just like right now.
I hope my
I just have
husband's
to
not
say,
listening
Brooke,
to this.
in our meeting before the podcast, I made a comment saying all children lie. So
Yeah. Children are filthy liars. Why do you say these things out loud?
I
I don't
don't
know.
know
Now
why
it's
we
on the
say these
podcast.
things out loud. Yeah.
Well, thank you for making me not go into RSD mode because I would have definitely thought about my comments a lot and been in that
No.
doom cycle.
Yeah.
So thank you
No,
for
it's all right.
stepping me out of it.
Yes.
But yeah, like I think the biggest thing that all humans as a society want is control, right? We
Yeah.
want to always, right? Like think about the name
Yeah.
of your podcast.
Right. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and we can't have control of everything. We can
Nope.
try. And that's why if you know you can control going and getting a glass of water or opening up the book or putting on clothes or going outside at the very basic level, then if we can't control the forest or
Mhm.
everything else, or like what other people are thinking or what the results are going to be, at least we can control a little bit of how we feel and what we do for ourselves.
I want to ask a pivoting question. As a person yourself who is an acknowledged member of an ADHD family, how do you handle the what I like to call the ADHD overwhelm contagion? Because we, in our family with multiple members with ADHD, we find we influence one another in a way that indescribably passes the state of anxiety and overwhelm from
Oh,
ADHD from one
yeah.
member of the family to the other. Happens all the time. How do you navigate those particular waters? What's the mental model for that? The self-talk that keeps you sane.
Yeah, good question. It changes every day, and I'm actively working on this with my therapist. So, thank you to all mental health
Yep.
professionals out there, because even us as coaches and mental health therapists, right? Like we need people like us to help us too,
Mhm.
because we're
Absolutely.
helping so many other
Amen.
people. Amen. Really, it's just the pause, the stop, the awareness of when my body is being triggered and when I'm starting to have that negative feeling towards my partner, towards my kids. Why am I starting to feel so negative? And am I tired? Or is this conversation not going the way that I thought it was going to go? So they're triggering me. So just taking the pause, taking the full on stop and coming back to it when my body's regulated, because nothing happens in a good way when you are emotionally dysregulated. And I was
Yeah.
even talking,
Yeah.
because this is really fancy and I just wanted to tell you, I was talking to my therapist and she was saying that you can't stay in an emotionally dysregulated conversation or an emotionally charged conversation for longer than 15 minutes.
Just as a
So,
result of stamina, like you
I
just
don't
run out of
know.
steam.
That's a great question, and I will have to get back to you on that. But it's like not Gottesman's theory,
Mhm.
Gottman's theory, but it's another person who like competes with him, and he says that like literally, if you have an emotionally charged conversation, I think your executive function is just obviously we know it doesn't work after a while, but like they really don't work
Shuts
after
down.
Yeah.
15 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
Which makes
so set a
sense
timer.
because it's one of those things that you leave the conversation and you're always like ruminating about how it went and like, oh, I should have said this or I should have said that. And it's like, but you didn't have those words in your mind at the time because you're so,
Well, you're
Yeah.
like
yeah,
neuronally exhausted, right? You
yeah,
just don't
yeah,
like when there's no juice in the tank, emotional
right.
juice.
Yeah.
Weird,
Yeah.
gross.
And with that emotional gross juice,
Yeah.
I think that doing something that is for you first, so you feel more empowered to have that conversation or to see your kids or your partner from a different lens. So like, are you having those difficult conversations or asking them, for favors or things that you would like around the house? And are you working collaboratively, first of
Yeah.
all? But at the same time, it's so hard to always have a collaborative conversation. So like, if you're going to come into a challenging conversation, make sure you're regulated, make sure you drink that water, work out, you've slept. And if you haven't done that and then you start being charged, just straight up practice stopping.
Well, and it's interesting with kids because you can read them before they even speak, right? Like cuz I can tell like when my daughter woke up, if she wakes up in a bad mood, it's good morning, Paige. Mm.
Oh yeah.
That's what I get. I get
Yeah.
Shut the door.
yeah. So then I
I'll
know,
come back and try that again.
Yeah.
okay. But then when I hear like good morning and she's like good morning, I know she slept well. Right? Or something's going
Exactly.
well. So I think for parents we also need to what does Carolyn McGuire say? Like, read the room. You kind of have to pause and read the room. And with children, especially, we can't take it personally. As parents, it's like, this is not a personal thing. She's not mad at me necessarily. Like, she probably just didn't get a good night's sleep.
But that's and that is the problem for the empathetic ADHD vibe, is that it doesn't matter if she slept good or bad. What matters is I feel poisoned by that reaction, and I'm sure it has something to do with me. Right? Sure. It's like I'm heavily influenced
RSD is
by
kicking
that.
in at that point. Yeah.
Right. What did I do?
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, I'm extremely impulsive right now because I'm excited by our conversation and my executive functions are working properly and I'm not emotionally charged. So I have another idea. So when you get into a conversation, asking for permission is now an okay time. Like, are you in the middle of something? Right. Because who with ADHD, whether it's your kids or your partner, likes being interrupted when they're like in mid text or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And then another thing is like, once you finish the conversation, on a scale from 1 to 10, I'm just wondering, like, I know this is going to sound like not great to some people, but how mad are you at me right now?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we feel like certain facial reactions are because they're mad at us or pissed at us, but it has nothing to do with us.
Right. That's interesting. I like that. From 1 to 10, how mad are you at me right now? That's good.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that.
Often it's 0, right?
Right.
Often it's 0.
Because it doesn't have anything to do with you.
Too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I got to tell a story. So I deeply relate to this. I have friends who are having some trouble. They're separating, and my friend goes to his mother and says, "Are you getting a divorce because of me?" She says that. The mother says that. And I think immediately, oh my God, what a delightfully narcissistic example to think about, a non-example on how to live my life. But that's it encapsulates exactly the emotional state I'm in when I get something like a on wake up, right? Clearly, you're pissed at me because of me. And I have to daily practice shedding that responsibility because it does not exist. It's not my fault. Whatever it is, all I can do is be a support to get through to the whatever is next.
Doesn't come naturally for us ADHDers. Before I knew I had ADHD, I would always try to get positive reinforcement from friends. Like, are you mad at me? What did I do? And then I remember them kept saying, like, it's not about you. Like, stop it. Now you're making me mad. It is about you now, right?
Totally. It wasn't before. Now you're a jerk.
Now it is. Yeah, so true.
Okay. Let's pivot yet again and talk about your fantastic book, Activate Your ADHD Potential. What's it about? What do you want people to know? It's amazing. Please.
Thank you.
Spread the word.
Thank you. So, as an ADHDer, it was on my bucket list to write a book. And I tricked myself. I'm like, I'm going to write this book in 3 days because I couldn't activate my book writing. I was making it too big, right? So I tricked my brain. I legitimately thought, like, I don't care. There's no attachment. 3 days. I'm going to bang it out. It's going to be 10,000 words. That's all I need, right? But again, not seeing the forest and just the tree, I started writing. I was like, oh, there's more. There's more. There's more. Like, I can't deliver a book just like this. Let me keep going. So anyway, the long of the short is Activate Your ADHD Potential has all of the tools that I've created in my signature process, 3C activation, from 2018 till 2024, right? And I made it accessible for everyone. So it's a workbook and it's a book. And it's for adults with ADHD. It's a 12-step process, and it takes you from chaotic with ADHD to controlled to confident in your life because you're building those action steps in a driven way to show up differently. So the thing that we talked about with getting past the underwhelm and overwhelm, that's just step 1 of the book.
Yeah. You call me out in the book
Does it say Pete Wright?
You don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't say
exactly.
Pete Wright, but believe me, we all know you'd say Pete Wright.
Obviously, I'm so mad at you.
No, yeah, I know you're so mad. This whole discussion of, and I think it relates to overwhelm. That when you talk about procrastination, you mentioned that the superhero in you wants to stop time, right, in order to get your stuff done. And I talk about this all the time because the worst parts of me, the parts of me that are unhealthy, say, you know what, maybe if I just pulled 2 all-nighters in a row while everyone is sleeping, I can do all the work. And that's like it that of course is insanity. Like, why would I intentionally do that to myself? That is damaging behavior, and it perpetuates damaging behavior. And so I going through the book, I felt really, really heard and shouted out. And so yes, thank you for it. It's a great addition. I like the idea that it is a workbook. Like, there's a lot to do. I didn't write anything down in it because, I've memorized all my answers. But I'm
going to quiz you in a second.
Yeah, right.
Hey, everyone has different learning styles. And I appreciate you saying that too, though, because, we want to be able to do everything all at once. And that's what burns us out. Yeah. And we don't recognize when we're getting into that state and what it was like the last time. That's our metacognition, right?
Yeah.
Our lack of metacognition. What happened? Some people, it takes months to recover from burnout. So think about how unproductive you're being by now shutting down from the world because you're so depleted.
Yeah. Right on.
Whole nother topic there for sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Are you working on another book? Do we have something else that you want to pitch? Where should people go learn more about you?
I am working on another book.
There we go.
And I'm putting it out there. It was, should I work on it? Should I not? But now I'm saying it, and it's already in production, but I wasn't going to get it out there soon enough, but now I'm going to get it out because I'm telling you. So,
so what we've learned is you're writing a new book. Children are filthy liars, and people are married have a problem. That's what we've solved today.
Just get me off the podcast, please. I'm embarrassed. I'm going to go shut down now. My next book is about entrepreneurs with ADHD and how to not burn out when scaling your business and how to do it with integrity. So I have a coaching cohort that I've been taking through how to build their ADHD coaching business. And I'm taking all 16 concepts from, culture, metrics, doing things the way that you want to do it, not because all the greatest marketers say you have to have this list and you have to do like 3 social media posts a day. Like, what actually works for your energy levels, and how are you going to show up and sustain a business with the metrics you really want, and why do you want it? So yes, I'm working on that right now, but in real time, you could just come to Coaching with Brooke. There's lots of free resources on Instagram. Have Coaching with Brooke. Everything like you guys is Coaching with Brooke. So it's super simple.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, I'll tell you, Coaching with Brooke, you're the best. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We sure appreciate it.
Pete and Nikki,
so are you for being here.
Oh. And to all of you listening, we appreciate you downloading, listening to the show. Thanks for your time and attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute to the conversation, we're heading over to the Show Talk channel in our Discord server. You can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. On behalf of Brooke Schnittman and Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you next week right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.